Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today our project is a Finor reel. It's an older reel. This is the Mega Drag. It's the MLX 3000. It's a nice reel, but this one, well, it takes all your effort to turn it. And the fellow brought it in and said, well, I guess it needs to be cleaned up. Well, that's an understatement. Okay, we're going to take this reel apart. We're going to show you how it's made. We'll show you how to service it. And hopefully we'll get this sluggishness out of there, because you certainly can't take this one fishing as it is. I'm wondering if there isn't something inside of it, like broken line or that's causing the issue. But the Finor reel overall is a nice reel. I'm going to guess this one's about 15 years old now. It has that Mega Drag on it, and that Mega Drag setup like this is comparable to the Finor Ahab series. Very nice series of reels. But this one I think has just been ignored for a long time. We see a lot of grease seeping through the case here. It's probably a combination of dried grease and just dirt and debris and things like that. At least fingers crossed, I'm hopeful for that. You can see it's been sitting on a boat or something. It's got the green rash on it, and well, it's time to tune it up. Well, before I go too far, I'm going to take off the exterior pieces, and I'm going to invite you to subscribe to my channel. If you like the art of reel repair, if you like how to see reels come together, how they are engineered, and how they are serviced and put back together again, this is a good channel for that. The idea behind Second Chance is to show you how to do it yourself and enable you to, well, gain some experience in fishing reel repair so that you're not afraid to do it either. There's a big cork drag underneath. That's going to be one of the things that's a Mega Drag, if you will. This plate here appears to be part of the axle shaft, so we'll go down below to do that. It appears that this is a screw-in handle, but I always recommend, if you do not know if it is or it isn't, to go remove that side cap on the other side and take a look. Sometimes there's a screw holding it on, just like now. And, well, if you just assumed that that was going to be a screw-in handle and you started to wrench it backwards, you're going to snap it. So always take a look. Even though it appears that it might be a screw-in, it may not. It may be a through handle. And if it is, well, a little bit of caution there can save you from damaging the reel. Well, I'm going to take that screw, I'm going to put it right back into the handle so I don't lose it. I'm going to put the pieces, just like I did with the spool, into my parts tray. The parts tray is the bottom of a fast food container, but you can use anything you like to organize your parts. Same thing with that little cap there. I'll put that in there as well. There's two exposed screws. There's probably another screw under the bump guard here, and that's how we're going to get into the case. We're going to remove these screws. While I'm doing that, I want to encourage you to take pictures along the way. Those pictures are going to be very beneficial to you should you get lost in the reassembly of the reel. I've used them on more than one occasion. Some folks say, well, where are you taking the pictures? Well, my pictures are the videos. You don't have to take a video. Use your cell phone camera, use a digital camera. Heck, use Polaroid Instamatics if you want. Doesn't matter to me. But take pictures as reference points along the way. Also do something like this. Line up your screws so that you can determine if there's any oddball screws in there. And then, well, if they're all the same size, that's wonderful. If they're not, you need to mark where the shorter or the longer screw came from. Now we know that short one on the table there belongs to the bump cap. It's really the other three in the case. The other three are the same size, so it's not going to matter where you put them on the reinstall. Well, here's the moment we've been waiting for. We want to see what's going on. I just tripped the anti-reverse override to off, and interestingly enough, that was very difficult to turn as well. It should be another indication that the issue here is probably dried grease. But until we get this off, we're not going to know. So let's get this case off. This is kind of leveraging around the handle here. I'm wondering if we don't have a frozen bearing on the gear shaft. So just be careful as you walk it out. Eventually this will come out, and you can see exactly why this reel has got such poor performance. That grease there has become tarred, it's become shellacked. Heck, I can't even scrape it off with a screwdriver. So that's telling you that it's probably the original grease in this reel, and I'm surprised that it survived. I don't know if we can get the main gear out. We probably can't. We need to work down towards the axle shaft then and remove that. I used that penetrating oil there as a dissolver, a solvent. I want to get to that screw, and I'm noticing that that screw is a small Phillips head screw, so I'm going to my micro drivers to remove that. You need to exercise caution when you find a reel like this. You just don't know what may or may not be frozen in it, and well, you just need to take extra caution when taking it out. We've removed the screw from the crosswind block. We should be able to pull up and out. That axle shaft came out nice and easy. That's one of the things you want to test as you remove the parts. If it was hard for you to pull it up after you disengaged from the crosswind block, then you certainly want to make sure that the axle shaft is true. Well, we're in a little bit of an issue here, and I think it's the same thing as the other side. We're going to want to try and push this through gently, but this is another case where this side is probably stuck in the bearing as well. We're just going to put that there, let it sit for a moment, come around the other side here, see if we can't work that free. And this is a problem when you don't service reels for a while. They tend to gum up, they tend to jam, and well, they tend to fight you all the way. I'm going to just turn that camera off, let that stuff sit for a little bit. Okay, I did another reapplication of the WD-40 as a penetrating oil, and it's starting to work free. I can kind of feel it. So just be careful with it, and you should be, there we go. Finally got it out of there. And I noticed that there's a lot of dried grease here as well. So there's no question in my mind that this performance of this reel has been impacted by the dried grease. And I'm hopeful that there are no broken parts in here, and that we can get this one fishing again. You want to take the time to inspect the gear. There's a lot of old grease that's up against the side here that was thrown in there from centrifugal force. I'm going to scrape that off and put that on my paper towel. I use a paper towel to keep the old greases and that as best I can off of my bench so that I don't transfer that to the next reel. I just did one more spray of that. Now I'm taking a hard brush and I'm running it through the teeth of the gear. I'm checking the teeth as I go to make sure that they're uniform, that they're not bent or cracked. I'm also looking on the back side here for the same. With that done, now we should be able to rotate and move this crosswind block up to the point where we can get it out of the case. This has got a ball bearing on it. I'm noticing as I'm doing this that everything turns slowly as well, so there's pretty much no question here that the issue is the bad grease. And I guess the fellow who brought this reel in, Jim, just kind of set it right, huh? It needs a little bit of work. All right, this is an interesting setup for your crosswind. Inside the block we have the stud, which is going to go in a slot on that crosswind gear. That's very interesting because most of the time the crosswind gear comes with the stud on it, and it goes into a slot on a crosswind block. Let's go ahead and take that out. And I'm not sure there's a right or a wrong side to the crosswind block, so we're going to look. Crosswind gear. Okay, so underneath there's some, just trying to make a note here, there's some tarnish and discoloration. Also looks like there's a little bit of a hole there. So just mark what is the top and what is the bottom on this, because you don't want to install it upside down, it may not work. It may work, but it may not. If you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, or maybe you just want to know more about a particular reel, maybe you want to know more about that manufacturer and so on, just leave it in the comments section. It doesn't have to be about this reel. I see all of the comments in the morning, and I will try to answer that for you. Test that bearing. Surprisingly, it's still working. I'm going to shoot that bearing with some penetrating oil for a moment. I'm going to let that sit so that it can gather itself easily. All right, I'm going to put that into the case, let that go in there. Here's this screw for the crosswind block. Let's change out the paper towel. And let's go up top now, and we'll remove the rotor nut. I'm using a 12mm tool for that. That's a tool that was actually for a Mitchell reel, but it works. And if you don't have that tool, don't rush out and buy it. Just use any deep socket. And in this case, you can probably get away with using an open end wrench because the lip is not that significant here. While I have all of this stuff kind of on the reel, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use that penetrating oil on the seams of the bail and on the line roller. And you just want to make sure that it flips easily. If it flips easily, you do not need to remove the bail as part of your service. All right, we're going to try and bring the rotor up. I noticed that we have a counterweight here that's come unglued. Now that's not a good thing. And that's not a good thing because you will get a wobble in the rotor. So we're going to have to take some time to clean this off and re-glue that counterweight. Just going to use a cotton swab to go ahead and clean that up. Now I need to go get some epoxy, so we'll shut that off again. For my epoxy, I'm using JB Weld. It's a nice one for a purpose like this. Equal parts hardener and what they call steel here. I'm using a plastic stirrer to mix it up, and I'm mixing way more than I'll ever need for this project. I don't like to use epoxy where I try to mix a very small amount because the margin of error on 50-50 is going to decrease as you put a bigger section together, and you want to make sure that this gets nice and well done here. Okay, I notice that there's a slot on the one side. I'm just going to put a little bit on both sides here. Use that stirrer as an applicator as well. There is a central point here. I'm going to use my pliers to kind of line that up. And then just press it in. It should set up fine. If I'm off camera, I apologize. You don't have there you go. That should be it. I'm centered there. The little excess isn't going to bother anybody. Notice that there is a little brass washer that goes on that. We're just going to set that aside. All right, that may take a little while to harden. Get rid of that so I don't get any more on the desk than I need to. And let's go back to servicing the reel. So I'm going to take the washer and the piece for the rotor, put them off to the side for a moment, and come up top here. So we have a ball bearing set up here with an override on it. And we have a lot of dirt on this one. As I mentioned before, I noticed when I was trying to just kind of get the case clean that it was very difficult to turn. So it's a matter of this old grease just affecting everything here. So we're going to use that penetrating oil again as a cleaner degreaser. I don't like using it as a lubricant. I love using it as a degreaser. And I'm just going to clean up the old stuff in the case. Sort of that old clean up in aisle 7 sort of thing. Again, I like to transfer the old greases if it's not on the on the cotton swab here where I can just throw it away. I do like to wipe it out onto the paper towel. So Finors have been around a long time. I'm not sure where this reel was made, but they started in the 1930s in Miami, and they have a great reputation. They were owned for a while there by Zebco, and about a year and a half ago they got sold to Penn, or actually Penn's parent, Pure Fishing, and they're now marketed under that brand or that conglomerate. There is a winged spring here that holds tension to this post. Just be aware of it. If you find a V-shaped spring, that's where it came from. We're going to go up top now and see what we can do about removing the pinion gear and assembly. I think this has an automatic or an instant anti-reverse. I do see a spring on the override, and we're just going to pay particular attention to that as we go forward. So you want to check as you take this off. You want to check, are the screws the same size? They're not. We have a long one back here and a short one here. And you want to check the orientation on the top piece. We have two studs here that kind of go into the plate. We also have a rounded shiny side to the top. That may be different below. But we have two small screws, one on each side of the override, and we have a long screw in the back. I'm just going to pull that down as such. We have a carrier here for the override. I'm going to see if we can get the pinion gear, or we can't. The whole thing is going to come off. So what I want to do here is hold my finger on that spring for the override, because that will shoot if you're not paying attention. And if it shoots, you're going to have a whole lot of fun trying to find that spring, because that's what it looks like when it's not compressed. This whole thing should come out now, and we can see that the effect of spraying that down with the penetrating oil has loosened up a lot of that rust. I want to remove the collar and the bearing, and I want to clean this. This is an open-faced, early on anti-reverse gear. So as long as that's working, I'm going to just leave that as it is on the post. You risk having the roller bearings come out if you start lifting. Make sure you get a nice amount of grease onto the gears for this pinion gear. Going again, we're going to do the same thing here with this bearing. Just put some penetrating oil on it to loosen it up. And now we want to clean behind and inside that channel now that that pinion gear is out of the way. So all of this is a hallmark of a reel that just hasn't been maintained. And a lot of times it's sort of like when you go to change your oil and the fella asks, when was the last time you had your oil changed? And you make up some number, and the guy who drains the pan knows it's at least twice the time that you're suggesting that was the last time. Okay, we have the spring and the collar. We want to bring the collar in. We need to knock that spring over to the side here before we mount that in. Easier said than done here. Okay. Make sure that you seat into the diagonal or the heptagonal, and we can put our retainer ring on the outside. Make sure that that is flush. If it isn't flush, it hasn't seated properly. There we go. I was making sure that it was flush here. The thing that was stopping me was the bottom of the post. It was located here. Okay, check that bearing. Make sure that it is turning. We got two of them here. I think one of them was the side plate bearing. A good way to test the bearing is to just take a screwdriver, or take a pen, a piece, and this one's kind of frozen, so we're going to turn it off and we're going to find a replacement bearing. This is the result of poor service. Okay, that took a little while, but I did find the replacement bearing. Just pitching it between my fingers now, that works fine. So we're going to go oil that up. So that'll be another reason why this reel was struggling. We're going to put that over the top now. And then we'll go get that collar. Take the collar. Remember, we left the top side. It was the shiny side. There's the two studs that it mounts on. And then we have the long screw goes to the back, and the two short screws go to the center. So this is a 30 size reel. It's good for rivers, lakes, piers, fishing from boat. Most larger freshwater applications. And well, you can go inshore ocean with this one as well, now particularly with braid. My guess is that this has spent a lot of time in the ocean because of the corrosion we saw on that handle by the knob. And my guess is that it hasn't been maintained in quite some time, as we discussed with the old pieces. Well, these are your bad bearings here, so we'll get them out of the way. And we'll continue on. Let's get rid of this piece here. And we've got a lot of dirt and debris and the like on that. And then I need to work to get this spring back onto the post. That's always a joy for me. This is not an easy thing to do. And just as you were risking losing that spring on the one side, you risk losing it this way as well. And I've managed to get it on the first try. Go figure that one out. Hard for me to see, but it's there. All right, so now we should have a free turning pinion gear assembly, and we're in the override mode here. We flip this the other way. Now we should have a anti-reverse that works, and it does. Okay, this one goes in the back side of the plate here, so we want to get that in. This is where pictures help. It's been a while since we've been underneath here. We had to stop, we had to do some epoxy, we had to stop, find a bearing. So it's easy enough to get confused. So you want to just take your time. There we go. All right, we're in, almost in. Push that in. We've tested that now, so we'll oil that, let that seep in, and we can come back and do the base stuff underneath here. Well, it's been working a while now. The bearing on the side plate here is working. I'm going to oil that. I'm going to take the crosswind block, or the crosswind gear, and that screw, and install that next. And when I install, I like to put that slot, in this case, facing the bottom. The reason why I got to do that is because I want that crosswind gear and the crosswind block low when we go to load the axle shaft in. If I recall now, this looks like it has to tilt in, and then we can load the stud in. I'm looking over the shoulder of this at the moment. There we go. Just had to get that snap. I wasn't getting the snap there. Once you do that, let's go ahead and take the grease brush again, put a little bit more grease onto the face and onto the teeth of that crosswind gear. We've already cleaned the main gear. Let's go ahead and put that back together then. You want to get a good helping of grease on there. We know this hasn't been worked in quite some time. So let's try to restore the grease and the lubrication that's been missing. Put the gear in now. Again, a nice little snap there. Oil the bearing that's on the gear. It's turning nice and easily. Let's get the gear shaft and a little bit of grease on there, not a lot. Bring the gear shaft down and merge that with your crosswind block. And get it where your screw hole for that lines up with the block. Once you do that, we can take the screw for that crosswind piece. That's the very small one. Remember, we had the micro screw there. Put a little bit of grease on there to hold that for my micro driver. And let's see if we can't get that in there. Okay, that actually is cooperating. That's a nice thing. And unfortunately, I put that in too soon. That rotor's got to go back on first. Falling into my pen habits where you can load that on without putting the axle shaft in. Let's pull that out. Just take a quick look here. That epoxy seems to have set. It's been a while now. Let's go ahead and put the rotor back on. There was a washer and a rotor nut. Not sure if somebody else added that washer, but I'm going to put that on nonetheless. It's probably acting as a lock. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's the way it goes because, well, there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to this reel. We'll see how it goes. We got a turn on that one. That's fine. Don't want to turn it too much because of this crosswind block here. And let's go back to that axle shaft. And we still have the grease on it. Looks like we have the tie down. I'll put that tie down screw back in. That'll stop the rotor nut from spinning and maybe becoming an issue. Now we can do that. So those of you that weren't paying attention the first time, join me in putting this together the second time. Again, you want to align that so that you have access to the hole. Let's take that screw and tie that down. So a key to successful reel repair is, well, what you're seeing. It's just taking your time, a little bit of knowledge, being patient, and making sure that as you're doing this, you take notes. Because if you get sidetracked like we did with a couple of different pieces and parts, you'll be able to come back in and reference them and make the reinstall go smoothly. Well, we noted that the 3 screws are all the same size for the side plates, so it doesn't matter which one they go in. When you do these, make sure that you're starting square. If you're having any trouble with these screws, please back them off, start again. These are kind of rough threaded screws because of the plastic or graphite case to them. But if you start putting them in on an angle, they don't cooperate. Okay, we have one more piece on the bottom here. This is the bump guard. That gets snapped in place, and then we have that short screw for the bump guard. And the handle can go in. This had the handle on the opposite side. It's one of those things, if you're doing reel repair for somebody, you need to notice which side the handle is mounted from. I said opposite because the majority of the handles I get are left-hand crank. This one was set up for a right-hand crank, so just pay attention to that. And tighten down that screw. Once that screw is tight, you get your case screw. Put that back on. Hand tighten is good. And then, as we saw, the drag is really the bottom drag here. There is a compression fitting up top, but this is your drag. It's cork. So cork can be greased. It's permeable, and you want to keep it flexible, so put some grease on there. I'm using a drag grease here, but you don't have to use a drag grease if you don't have it. And then I'm wiping off the excess. Let's go ahead and put that back on. Let's lock in the spool now. This has got one heavy spring here. So a lot of times folks ask me, what is the purpose of those ears on the outside here? Surprisingly enough, the only purpose for those ears is to help you as you go to turn the knob. That's it. That doesn't do anything in terms of tightening the drag. Just helps you to tighten it down, giving you a little bit of extra leverage on your fingers. I'm just going to tighten it to make sure that we hold on the drag. Still got a little bit of play in it. There we go. And once I do that, I'm satisfied that it's going to hold. I'm going to back that drag off. Okay, the gloves are off. It's time for the final test then. So let's review. We've taken the reel completely apart. We found out a lot of dirt and grease and grime and debris, and lack of service was the reason why this was performing poorly. We still have the epoxy probably curing underneath. I think it's got the initial tack, but it's curing, so I'm not going to go crazy here in terms of the test, but I do want to make sure it spins and that everything is working as it should. So let's give it a go. We'll look at that now. 2 fingers and you can turn it with ease, and this one's ready to go fishing again. So we're going to let that set. We're going to let that epoxy cure, but overall we've showed you how to service the reel after taking it apart, diagnosing what the issues were, cleaning out the old, and relubricating, re-oil, and in this case replacing 2 bearings in the reel. And that enabled us to get this reel fishing again, giving it a second chance. So I hope you've enjoyed that. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe Your efforts truly are appreciated. And to everyone, please stay safe, stay well, good luck fishing, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.